Welcome everyone and our speakers to our discussion about worker surveillance at Amazon. This conversation is part of the Media Justice and Athena Eyes on Amazon campaign. My name is Ryan Garrity and I work at United for Respect, a national worker organization that organizes Walmart, Amazon, and other retail workers. The Eyes on Amazon campaign is holding Amazon accountable for its failure to live up to the pledge that Amazon made when it said Black Lives Matter 1 year ago. That was following widespread calls to defund the police after the murder of George Floyd. At that time, Amazon said it would temporarily stop selling face recognition to police departments. But as Amazon made that announcement, it was quietly signing hundreds of other agreements with police departments around the country to promote easy, warrantless access to Ring doorbell surveillance and to its neighbor app that hosts racist vigilante behavior. If that wasn't bad enough, Amazon continues to be the server backbone for the Department of Homeland Security, fueling detention and deportation of immigrants. Meanwhile, for its warehouse workers and drivers, there's a very eerie parallel to this police surveillance. As we will hear, Amazon surveils its workers constantly. It uses surveillance at every opportunity to turn up the pressure on workers, pushing them to work harder and faster. It's a constant cycle of surveillance, discipline, and pressure. It's a system that leads to injury, anxiety, termination, and high turnover. Even when Amazon enabled social distance monitoring during the pandemic, which was supposed to keep workers safe, Amazon immediately turned against workers, trying to find small infractions, even as workers were trying to stay safe. We've also seen Amazon use the same surveillance against workers who organize and speak out. Last year, Amazon fired several workers who spoke out, most of them Black, and with so-called evidence Amazon gathered from its trove of data about each worker. At the same time, it was using social media surveillance and hiring intelligence analysts to root out organizing activity. Just a few months ago, workers in Bessemer started to organize, and when they talked about conditions, they talked about the rate and time off task surveillance that creates the grueling and dangerous conditions. In fact, Amazon workers have been organizing against the brutal pace of work enforced by surveillance since 2018, when workers in Minneapolis walked off their jobs. And in Europe, they were organizing even earlier. Over the last year, worker organizers and worker activists have come together with anti-surveillance activists to talk about the shared racist history of both police and worker surveillance. These organizations include Media Justice, United for Respect, Warehouse Worker Resource Center, Fight for the Future, Public Citizen, Free Press, Make the Road, Our Data Bodies, National Employment Law Project, Color of Change, and many others. Today, we are going to ground this conversation in the over 24,000 injuries caused by Amazon's grueling workplace conditions last year. We have here David Rosenblatt from Strategic Organizing Center, formerly Change to Win, who co-authored the report on these injuries. The Strategic Organizing Center is a coalition of 4 labor unions, the Teamsters, SEIU, Communications Workers of America, and United Farm Workers of America. Together, these affiliated unions represent more than 4 million workers. We are also joined by Courtney and Allegra Brown, sisters who are powerful worker activists who work at Amazon, who have been speaking out and organizing against worker surveillance and for a safer, healthier workplace at Amazon. Today, they are here as experts on the way that Amazon uses surveillance to enforce productivity rates and track time off task. They work at an Amazon Fresh Center in New Jersey. Finally, we have Gabrielle Rejui at Color of Change. Gabrielle has written about the surveillance that is turned against low-wage workers, and she's discussed the connection to racist police surveillance in Black and brown neighborhoods. She'll discuss the shared history that those systems have and what lawmakers can do to protect workers. So first, I'm going to turn it to you, David, to lay out the findings of your report for us.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to try to share my screen so folks can see some of the graphics from our report. Is that looking all right for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today. Honored to be with these esteemed panelists and to support this work, which is inspired by and following all of that amazing speaking out that workers have been doing for years at Amazon. So as Ryan mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of Strategic Research and Campaigns with the Strategic Organizing Center, and we've been working for the last year or two to bring attention to some of the major negative impacts that Amazon has on competitors and communities and workers. And we have a particular focus for this project on health and safety. Under the federal law governing health and safety in the workplace, the OSHA Act, as people know it, Amazon, like most employers, is required to keep track of its injuries in the workplace and to report information about these injuries to federal OSHA every year. In 2020 and early 2021, OSHA began releasing injury data for all employers. This is the first time they had done this. So we saw an opportunity to analyze injury rates at Amazon with a much larger amount of information than anybody had ever had, right? People know that Amazon is incredibly secretive and has not released this information itself. Some reporters and researchers have worked, and workers have worked to get this information in the past, but it's always been for a pretty small number of facilities. With this new data, we have access to more injury information than had ever been public before. Our most recent data set for 2020 includes 638 different Amazon warehouse facilities, right? Which include the fulfillment centers, sortation centers, delivery stations, everything. We also went beyond this data to try to find information about delivery driver injury rates. So I'm going to try to walk through a few of the different ways we analyzed this injury information and what we saw going on at Amazon. I imagine a lot of it is not going to be news to anybody who works at Amazon or has paid attention to this over the years, but hopefully it is a valuable and powerful new way to bring up these issues. So first of all, just looking at Amazon in comparison with other employers. So what you see here is a measure of how many injuries happened in each of these categories per 100 full-time equivalent employees, right? So that's a full-time equivalent employee is a worker who's working 2,000 hours in 1 year, which is basically a full-time job. We know that there's lots of people who work part-time at Amazon. We know that there's people who do overtime and might work more than full-time sometimes. But this is about, creating a rate and an average that standardizes it across the whole employer. And so what we see is that Amazon has a substantially higher injury rate in 2020 than all non-Amazon warehouses, and even higher than all employers, including all of the non-warehouse employers. Our analysis focused in on what we call serious injuries, which is the kind of injuries where people are hurt bad enough that they have to stop doing their regular assigned job, right? They have to go do light duty work, or they have to actually stay off of work in order to recover. Amazon's serious injury rate, which is the orange and the black bars in this graphic, was 5.9 injuries for every 100 workers in 2020, which is 80% higher than the serious injury rate for other warehouses, right? Warehouses are already more dangerous places than working in the mall, right? But Amazon was dramatically more dangerous as a place to work than even other warehouse employers. It also was more than triple the serious injury rate for all employers. We also looked specifically at the trends over time about what's happening with Amazon's injury rate. So this shows you the trend over the 4 years for which we had information. And what we saw was that from 2017 to 2019, we saw steady increases in Amazon's injury rate, which you can see in this graphic. And then in 2020, we saw a pretty significant drop in the injury rate that was reported to OSHA. And so you might ask, what happened in 2020? What was different, right? Well, we had a global pandemic. And we saw, as Ryan mentioned, workers speaking out with community members and pressuring Amazon to change its warehouse operations in ways that it had never changed its warehouse operations before, right? We saw Amazon relaxing rate, relaxing time off task, doing less discipline of workers in a lot of facilities. And that combined with the need to pause or slow down or sanitize or do other kinds of COVID related things, we think contributed to this lower injury rate. You also see a growing use of light duty, and we've seen reporting from workers and from reporters that Amazon is more and more pressuring workers who get injured to stay on the job and do light duty instead of recovering away from work. And so we think that's what's contributing to the growing presence of light duty in this data. Again, all we're able to see through this data is what Amazon itself reports to the federal government. And so it definitely doesn't tell the whole picture, but it's a powerful analysis because it's the company itself putting in this information.
Great.
We also use this data to try to look at what's happening with Amazon's robotic facilities and its non-robotic facilities. We had seen previous analyses that showed that there's higher injury rates where they're using robots in the facilities. And we saw that in this data as well. You can see in 2017 through 2019, there was a much higher injury rate in the robotic facilities than in the equivalent non-robotic facilities. And then that gap dropped pretty significantly in 2020. Again, a whole lot of weird stuff was going on in 2020 that could be explaining some of that change. Our best theory about what's driving the difference in the robotic facilities is connected to all the things we're going to hear from the rest of the panelists today, is that the robots are really good at surveilling workers and pushing the rate faster and faster and faster. And so in those facilities, the speed is going to contribute to the injury rate as well. And then we were also able to use this data to break down the different types of facilities within Amazon and the different types of injury rates going on in them. And what we saw there was pretty striking, that the closer the product gets to the customer, the higher the injury rates are, right? So the fulfillment centers, the big warehouses, have a very high injury rate, higher than other warehouses. But the delivery stations that are closer to the customer have an even higher injury rate. And the delivery drivers who are being driven so fast to hit that number of packages per day have even the higher injury rate. And so it was striking to us that the time pressure and production pressure seems to intensify as it gets closer to the customer, and the injury rate does as well. Just one thing to note, that during the pandemic in 2020, the injury rate for the delivery service providers and the data we were able to see did not change, right? And there was less changes to the operations on the delivery side. And so that sort of supports the idea that some of these COVID-related changes contributed to the injury rate changes in the warehouses. Lastly, we didn't want to go just with Amazon's data. And so we actually did an online survey in February of almost 1,000 Amazon workers. And what we heard from those workers who responded to the survey was that more than 40% said that they had experienced pain or injury on the job that was serious enough to miss work. And that when we asked people who had been injured, what they felt contributed to that injury, 8 in 10 of them said that their pain or their injury was related to production pressure or speed. So reinforcing the idea that Amazon's obsession with speed and production is, in workers' experience, directly contributing to the high injury rates. So thanks for the opportunity to share this research, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from other folks and answering any questions people might have.
Great, thank you, David. Courtney, I want to turn to you, and I'm hoping you can help us. I'll let you respond to the report in a minute, but first I want to ask you to help us understand what working at Amazon is like. Walk us through a sort of typical work week. Talk to us about how the day goes and even what happens before and after shifts and at the end of your week.
Okay, so let's see. I'll use my long week that I just finished a couple of days ago as the blueprint. I worked 4 days, so I worked Wednesday to Saturday. My day starts at 4:30 in the morning. Take an hour to get ready. By 5:30, I'm in my Uber on my way to work. I'm there usually about 5:55. That's usually when I get the pass down for like what the blueprint for the day is gonna look like and how we're probably gonna, whatever difficulties we're probably gonna face and anything and what we need to prepare for as best as possible. So that usually means like me and the supervisor usually picking up more than we normally would in order to try and make the day go as smooth as possible or meet the standards that our shift manager, our operations manager has. So that's usually me like literally bouncing from area to area to area, doing a job that normally would take about 4 to 5 other people to do, and you have me doing that one job. And I work usually 6 a.m. to 5:30, sometimes 6 p.m., sometimes a little later. It all depends on what's going on exactly. But usually the more things that I have to do throughout the day, the longer I'm probably going to be there. So I work on shift doc, so I am responsible for helping to make sure everything gets sent to the customers in New York City and certain parts of Jersey on time. And it's just like sorting thousands of packages every day, unloading trucks, loading trucks, and it's just 11 hours straight usually. So I'm just from dealing with truck drivers and dealing with managers and everything. I'm literally running around usually the whole warehouse. So say like if we're missing a couple of bags and stuff, because I work in a fresh warehouse, so I deal with food. So I'm literally running around trying to re-get those items for that order if it happens to be missing, but when we're trying to send it out, and then like just trying to go everywhere and do as much as possible. And that's just one day. Then I have to do it the next day. Then I have to do it the next day. And then I have to do it, for a third or fourth time. And every day is different because, there may be an email that usually gets sent down to everybody. And like, they'll be like, okay, well, this is what we're thinking about doing. Like last week we had one of our friends, he works with the shift manager, and he had told them, okay, well, we want to do a record-breaking number, 113,000 units in a day. And we struggle doing the 80 to 89K that we normally do. And we're just like, okay, he's delusional, but sure, we'll play ball as best as we can. So it just literally created something where it's just like, okay, my lunches, my breaks are sometimes non-existent, or like I have to, okay, well, I'm going to work like 10 hours straight. And then at the end of the day, instead of like taking a break or whatever, I'll clock out for lunch, and then that's just it. I go home. I get home about 6:30, depending, like I said, on what's going on. And I usually don't eat. Like I don't eat dinner. I may like grab something on the way out from our Avenue C spot inside the warehouse, just to like munch on when I get home, and then I pass out. And then like, we'll wake up in the middle of the night and we'll, like me and the supervisors and the manager will like message each other like, I have a feeling like this is going to happen. We need to be prepared for this tomorrow. Or somebody, texted us and said, hey, they're not coming. They're exhausted. So that's for a couple hours. And I wake up sometimes, most of the time, I honestly, I really don't go back to sleep. So I sleep like 4 or 5 hours, and I'm up the rest of the night, and then repeat the process over and over again. And then at the end of my work week, which is usually every Sunday. When I get home Saturday night, I usually get home at like 6:30, almost 7 o'clock. So the last day, sometimes there's a lot of BS usually going on, and we try to make sure we set nights up for success because they're turning over to the other side of day shift. So I'm asleep by like 7:30. I will probably wake up twice to use the bathroom, and I'm literally unconscious until like 2 p.m. I'll wake up at 2 p.m., I'll eat, and then I go to sleep until about 5, 6 a.m. the next day, Monday morning. And then that's when I if I have errands to run, I'll run them Monday and Tuesday. I didn't really have anything to do too much yesterday and today, but tomorrow is usually the day where I'm like stressing out for 24 hours because now I got to go back and I got to do it all over again. And we have actually gotten messages about stuff that they want to do and some changes that they want to do. And it's just, yeah, so I'm actually already stressed even before I got to go back to work. It's a lot.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about how that constant productivity pressure, the pressure to make whatever rates set, impacts how you feel and what you think about during the day?
It's exhausting. Like, I have plantar fasciitis and tendonitis, so I'm in pain every day, all day for my 11 or 12 hours, however long I have to work. Like, I'm in constant pain. So like anything where I have to lift something that's heavy or move something that's heavy, like I literally have to think about how I'm going to maneuver so that way I don't feel that like the pain doesn't get too bad or whatever. But it's just like, if they're telling us, hey, well, we have to untap this, we have to give you guys more because our numbers aren't good out here and we're getting pushback from the top. So, here come another extra 10K. Then it's just like, oh crap, like I got to prepare for this. And then like literally my brain starts thinking about, later on, the day after that, and the day after that. And sometimes it's so bad to the point where it's just like, when I get home, or I'm thinking about like, how am I really going to have to sacrifice my feet to the point where when I get home, I'm going to have to crawl to the bathroom because it's going to be too painful for me to walk. So it's just like, is that worth it? Or am I just going to say, F it? And like me and the supervisor will normally like talk to each other and we'll decide like, he'll sometimes overwork himself to the point where like his knee will lock and you'll literally see him hobbling around, or like he'll have his head down on the desk like he's trying to just like shake it off right quick so that way he can get back to whatever he's doing, because he feels bad that like when I go home in the middle of the night, I can't walk to the bathroom. I literally have to crawl. So like either he's sacrificing his body to do more to meet their, to make their numbers better, or I'm sacrificing. Or there's plenty of days, like last week, we both did it and we were both dead by, by Thursday. So it's stressful. And it's just like, okay, well, if I want to do something on my days off or something like that, depending on how bad that goes, like how much I have to sacrifice my body, that's going to depend on whether if I even have a life outside of work. So a lot of the times it's just like, shit, like I have no choice but to sacrifice all of this here. And that means I fall behind in important stuff that I have to do outside of work. Sometimes that even means doctor's appointments, just like genuinely physically taking care of myself, and there's times where it's just like, you want to cry, you want to give up, but it's just like, shit, like, am I really going to let them break me? But then again, it's just like, I shouldn't have to, it's stressful. So you want to cry, but then it's like, you know what? No, inhale, exhale. I got this. I can do it. But then it's just like, you shouldn't have to do it. But it's weird. It gets stressful. Like most of the time you want to go in a corner and you literally just want to cry for a little bit. And then other times you just like, you know what? I don't have time to do that because they're, literally like yelling at me for whatever bullshit. So,
And how did you get those injuries?
From back when, honestly, my first year at Amazon, I've been here at this warehouse for almost 4 years from August. And it literally happened because they were constantly pressuring us to go faster, faster, faster. And so their idea of sometimes, tricking us to going faster than, what's honestly humanly possible is, they'll tell us, oh, well, if you do this, then we'll give you this, and if you achieve this position here, then we'll do, by processing more for us and we'll do this for you. And actually that year when it really like, you know, I literally had to leave one day because I was crying and slammed, because this was back when I used to close packages for 2 days out of my work week. And like, I couldn't stand. I went to the bathroom and I cried for 20 minutes and I had to leave to go to the ER. And that's when they told me they thought I had plantar fasciitis. And like, basically all that pushing, it ended up actually pushing me to being number one in my whole entire warehouse, where I actually won a 32-inch TV. I was number one on the ship dock for sorting, number one for slam, and number one for picking. And it sounds great, but then when you look at the cost of, you know, like that, like I literally damaged myself pretty much permanently. So I can never perform at that, like, just for them to, you know, and they're like, number one thing is, oh, well, you know, if you don't do all of this, then we're going to have mandatory extra time. You're going to have to come in for an extra day. There's no like, you know, choice in whether if, you know, you want to come in for overtime or not. You're going to have mandatory extra time if you guys aren't processing this amount of units. And that's what was passed down to us from managers and shift leaders, that like, look, we want to do this to, you know, push all of these guys, but we also need you PGs to like, you know, step it up too and process this, because, you know, you value your off days and you don't want to have to come in an extra day. You're going to have to process it. And I end up actually winning that competition they had.
Allegra, let's turn to you. You work in a different part of the warehouse. Help us understand what it's like as a picker. Walk us through your day and what's hard about it.
So as a picker, you're, you know, picking and fulfilling people orders every day. And it gets really stressful because they're constantly sending you messages about, you know, you have a cart that's due, packages have to go out, and then they still want you to, you know, you have to maintain 6 feet still. And then you're in the aisle with everybody. Everybody's on top of each other. You know, they're still hiring people. So all the aisles are crowded and they still expect you, you know, to maintain the 6 feet rule and everything else. And then you're still being penalized for TOT and rate and everything. They're pushing rates on people really hard because they want to push out more work.
Can you tell us what rate and TOT are? Help explain it to people
Rate
who
is
don't know.
basically like your number, like it's your rate, like how well you're performing basically. And TOT is time off task. It's about like your break time and stuff like that. Like when you're scanning, like from scan to scan, and you're basically being tracked. Like when was your last scan? Say you go to break, your break is at 8 o'clock to 8:20. They expect you to get your last scan in at 8, and then your first scan in for after break at 8:20. So they're literally tracking scan, like from scan to scan, the time you scan. And if you don't get your scanning on time, then that's when you start accumulating TOT, time off task. And I believe 30 minutes of TOT is the first written, an hour is a final. No, an hour is the second written. And I believe a final, which is also termination, is 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. And what does it feel like knowing that at every second you're being timed?
It's very stressful. It literally beats you down, wears you down, because you're constantly being pressured to perform each time at give even better numbers. That it was hard for you to reach the first time because, you know, you're only human. And, you know, you're coming in every day, you're working hard. It gets tiring. You're tired. You know, we need a break.
How does that anxiety impact you then after work?
After work, honestly, I'm just like done. Like I tell my sister, like, if I'm not on clock, honestly, I don't want to hear about Amazon. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want anything to do with it. I go home. I go right to sleep. I don't wake up till early the next morning. I don't have any energy to do anything at all.
And
And
go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say like where I work at, like I'm closing packages and I'm like lifting them and they're actually extremely heavy. And I've been doing it for a little over a year. So my back, like, is literally destroying my back. Like this morning I woke up, I couldn't move. Even like I finished my work week on Sunday evening. Sunday evening, 5:30. And from the moment I got out, like my back was killing me. It just probably started feeling better early this morning.
Mm. And how common is it among your coworkers to have like injuries and pains like that?
It's really common. Like a lot of people have it, especially I know even like a lot of new people, because you know they're not used to performing at that pace and having that level of intensity being put on their body. And you're coming in every day and you're doing it, you're not giving your body a chance to recuperate from all that. So it's just beating you even more down.
Mhm. And Prime Day is coming up on, I think, July or June 21st and 22nd. What are workers going to be thinking and feeling during Prime?
A lot of stress, anxiety, and just people are going to be exhausted. Yeah.
Hmm.
A lot of people won't be thrilled about working during that time.
Mhm. And Courtney, how do you see things change with the productivity pressure around Prime?
I'll probably be having a breakdown. All jokes aside, no, but seriously, like a lot for Prime. We used to what do you call it? Not like have it impact us so much because we had another like site inside of our warehouse, but they removed that site and added a return site now. So a lot of what they would have picked up for like our pantry stuff, we're going to be doing now. So that means our numbers will be higher. So that means, you know, from inbound and outbound. Inbound, they're the stores, the ones who replenish all the items on the shelf. They're being pressured, I know right now, to actually, bring in a lot more product and to put a lot more product out. They also currently added something extra that they're trying to find out a whole like leadership structure for that we were actually talking about last night. I don't know why they wanted to talk about that on an off day, but sure. So like they started gearing up for a lot of that now. So it's a lot more pressure, a lot more responsibility that's about to be on us. So right now they actually had us starting the end of May prepare by like training more people to come over and to work with us. And they're trying to set like a standard or an outline so that a way we can push more product out. We can deliver more, you know? So like the stress is already, it's like slowly they're trying to like build it on there because they haven't really said too much to us about Prime, which is kind of weird, but like certain things we've noticed and we've come to like recognize is like, okay, Prime's coming up, y'all. Like, let's go, let's, you know, like, and a lot of us, since we're like going to be dealing with all of that headache, because normally when Prime is, you know, going on for those couple of days, like we feel it for like a good 2 weeks. We feel it for a good 2 weeks because people, you know, they start wanting to buy stuff the week before and the week after. So we'll get hit hard for a good, you know, like about 2 to 3 weeks, and then we'll see a decline. But it'll just be like, as soon as we come in and like, even, you know, after we leave work, they'll be messaging us about things, about performance and about, you know, how they're expecting us to meet these standards, meet these higher numbers, because last few weeks they've been pressuring us like, okay, well, your numbers were good, but they're not like our standard good. So this is like, you're here, which is, you know, like, that's, you know, good on you, but we need you all the way up here. So figure out how you're going to get there. And you need to be there. There's no buts, ifs, or ands. So it's just constantly us going over numbers. Okay, well, if we have this many people here, you know, then that's why we're at that level. So that means we have to cut. So we literally have to understaff and basically overwork ourselves so we can meet that, because now they're ranking all supervisors. So if you're not performing at where they want, they will literally have it like, okay, well, they have, you know, my two friends, they're in the top, actually 3 friends, they're in the top 3. And then like you have people where they literally have them listed as last, like they pretty much suck. And that, you know, hurts your chances of getting like a manager position.
Hmm.
So
And
like in the last few weeks, that's been something that they've been like pressing more and more and more. And now they're like back to pressuring me to get back into that thing as well. And it's just like, you know, because they want more numbers. They want, you know, they're putting out more merchandise. They're opening up more things. They're coming up with more ways to push out more, so that way we get more numbers, and then like pushing us faster. They actually raised the rate again. So the rate will probably get raised again for Prime. And a lot of the people, you know, they tend to, you know, like my friends on other shifts, they text me, they're just like, oh, I'm your twin today. Basically, that means they're limping like me. So, and it's not uncommon to see people start walking around in like high product days like Prime coming up, like literally limping, or like you see them like they'll hold their back, or, you know, they're constantly like trying to, you know, loosen up their shoulders or something. You'll start seeing that more physically. And then like people not being able to like, they'll tell you like, look, man, I normally do this job. I can't do this job today. You know, like I'm hurting too much. So we're gonna start seeing more of that. We started seeing a little bit, but we're about to start seeing more of it as we get closer.
Thank you. Gabrielle, let's turn to you. I wanted to kind of step back and talk about how we got to this place where we have employers, in this case, the second largest employer in the whole United States, that uses all of its technological power to monitor, surveil, control workers in order to squeeze physical and mental effort out of them. How did we get here?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think when we talk about the historical surveillance of workers, there are 3 examples that come to mind: enslaved Africans, the American factories, and the surveillance of the United Farm Workers. So surveillance and privacy discourse rarely roots our current debates in history, but it's very important to know that these are neither new struggles nor new techniques. While the tools have evolved, the spirit behind surveillance has not. So Simone Brown's book, Dark Matters, makes the argument that the surveillance of enslaved Africans provided the blueprint for surveillance today. Matthew Desmond's essay for the New York Times Magazine 1619 Project digs into the system designed to ensure slavery was profitable. Slave owners sought to optimize the productivity of the enslaved population and created systems to scrutinize their work. This surveillance evolved with sharecropping, with Jim Crow, and the prison industrial complex. In the late 19th century, Frederick Taylor developed a system of industrial management to ensure factory workers were as productive as possible. Tasks were simplified. Foremen would use stopwatches to ensure that workers on the line completed tasks to meet daily goals. In practice, Taylorism sought to make a worker so efficient they would not be allowed to make mistakes. Next, I want to touch on surveillance to oppose and frustrate worker power. Managers use surveillance as the primary tool to disrupt worker organizing. But the government also has a history of surveilling labor activists for communist ties. J. Edgar Hoover, for instance, ordered a decades-long investigation of Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and the United Farm Workers during the 60s and 70s. The United Farm Workers sought to unionize Mexican and Chicano-American farm workers harvesting agriculture in the American Southwest. Despite the extensive FBI surveillance and infiltration, for instance, agents knew what Chavez ate for breakfast and were arrested at worker demonstrations, no subversive ties were found. Anti-surveillance work shouldn't look at law enforcement or corporations as isolated forces. Surveillance is a means to control populations. It reinforces carceral systems. We're watching as private, public, or corporate government distinctions are eroding. Big tech continues to build the technology and system for government actors to conduct surveillance. We also see government actors exploiting loopholes to access this information. So for instance, Amazon pitched its facial recognition technology to ICE and immigration enforcement. Local law enforcement used Clearview AI facial recognition software without proper authorization. And US military intelligence collected data from Muslim prayer apps. There are communities that are already fighting against surveillance, and they have things to teach folks who are new to this work. Collaboration is necessary to ensure the solutions that are built have all stakeholders in mind. In the same way consumer privacy legislation is long overdue, we also need to call for worker data protection. People should not have more protections off the clock than they do at work. Surveillance and digital tools to control workers create both physical and mental dangers to workers. Advocates are calling for protections that would ban and strictly regulate surveillance and algorithmic management at work. Some solutions include prohibitions on what data is collected, when and where it's collected, and how it's used. In particular, attempts to use data collection to hold workers to specific rates, like rate and time off task, must be banned. Legislation should disrupt the use of surveillance to constantly monitor and discipline workers, like we heard from Allegra and Courtney. Opportunities for workers to shape policies around data collection and to have input on what technology is introduced into the workplace is also necessary. We need independent, robust audits of the algorithms being used to direct and manage workers. And lastly, we need to make sure that independent contractors, franchise employees, and subcontractors are also protected as workers. It won't be enough to get consumer data protection without worker data protection as well. We need more support to ensure our data isn't used against us.
Thank you. Courtney, well, actually, let me start with you, Allegra. Listening to the history of the use of surveillance to control and monitor workers, what does it make you think about in your current workplace? Does anything sound familiar?
Can you repeat the question? It was breaking
Yeah.
up.
Just listening to Gabrielle go back and look at the history of worker surveillance, like from the plantations to the early sweatshop factories. What do you think that it says about Amazon that it's using similar practices in the warehouses?
They view us as slaves. It basically means the same as how we were viewed back then. They're viewing the workers as it. They're just trying to, in a sense, tweak it or twist it and make it seem more like it's not as bad. Well, if we give them this or we throw this at them, you can't really say that we're doing this and that, even though in the end you still are. You're just either throwing like a bonus or something else in their face, thinking that it's okay to do what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Courtney, any reflections you have on thinking about the sort of long history of surveillance in American capitalism?
It makes sense. Like, not make sense like that. Like, it's the connection, yeah. Because when you think about it, what do we call what we do? You know, the fulfillment side. We don't call it fulfillment. When I worked at Macy's, they called it fulfillment, you know, and other places. But when you look at places like Amazon, they call it picking. It is literally called picking. You know, like picking cotton, we're picking. And then on top of that, the way that they get us to, you know, increase productivity, and then they get us to perform things outside of our normal, you know, normal responsibility. Our job description is, you know, it's just like, I guess you could say how they used to do, you know, like certain slaves like this. They gave them, you know, like if you did this, then you wouldn't get this bad a treatment. And that's literally how it is. Like a lot of us, we overworked ourselves. We pushed ourselves past our body's limit so that way we could get out of that whole, you know, picking thing, because that was seen as really bad. But then like when you get into other areas, you see like, holy shit, like I got scammed. Like this is worse now. And it's literally just a never ending cycle. And they keep feeding to the public like, oh, we're, you know, inclusive. We hire everybody. We don't care what your, you know, sexual identity is or whatever you are, whatever color you are, wherever you come from. We don't care about that. But then that's what the workforce mostly is. But then when you look at all of the leaders, the higher you go, the paler it gets. But to make it seem like it's not, that stuff is not going on, they'll probably hire like, one Black person that's a manager. Like at our site, it's not very often where we get, actually, I think he is actually the first Black male ops manager. All the other ops managers, it wasn't like a trial and error thing. We have what's called seasonal supervisor spots. Manager spots are manager spots. You get it, you're a manager, whether if it's a shift leader, operations manager, or just a regular area manager. But for him, the only Black man, you know what? I'm gonna give you a trial spot. We're gonna see if you're good enough to hold this spot. And then when, he actually performed above their standards, you're like, okay, well, I guess we got no choice but to give it to you. But how often does that happen? Very rarely. We only had 2 Black female managers in that whole warehouse out of how many, managers total. And Amazon has a practice where they don't really promote from within, because remember, most of your workforce is going to be people that look like me, or other minorities, whether they're Asian, Indian, whatever, And so they hire from outside, and outside managers are always white. So it's really weird. It definitely, about the thing, like all of this, it makes it, it's still the same. The only thing is they give us a paycheck, and is that we choose to go, work for them. But with the pandemic, they took advantage of the fact that like Black communities were desperate, so they came here to my neighbor. You know how many neighbors I have that work in my warehouse, just my warehouse alone, or the one 10 minutes up the road from us, or do some kind of Amazon work. One of our neighbors that live in our house actually works for Amazon. She worked for LGA 9 in Edison. So they literally came to Black neighborhoods preying on the fact that we were the ones that probably suffered, the most, and we needed a job.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the ones who were dying the most. And nothing hasn't changed. The only thing they did was give us a paycheck, and they're saying, oh, well, we're giving you a paycheck, so technically it's not slavery, even though they still have the same practices.
Mm-hmm. And does it surprise you that Amazon provides surveillance tech to police departments? I know you've been in conversations with anti-surveillance activists that fight police surveillance. What kind of connections do you draw to that?
It makes sense. Anybody that's still practicing anything from back in the plantation days, of course they're going to provide stuff to the police and, anything to help them. It makes sense because they're still upholding those disgusting standards from back then. So it only makes sense that they would give to another organization that is still upholding those disgusting things from back then. Same way how the original officers were really slave hunters. And, today they, their version of hunting slaves is hunting Black criminals in Black communities, which isn't really, the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. And then they have, I'm pretty sure they donate to a lot of these places, a lot of these institutions. Shitty people are going to always back up shitty people and only, help them do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Allegra, any connection you see between the Amazon's police relationships and the way they treat workers and in the warehouses? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I was muted. But it's literally what she says, literally the same with everything.
I wanted to ask, David, since you wrote this report on injuries, any reflections you have on the stories that Allegra and Courtney shared? You're muted. Yep.
I think they're incredibly powerful and important stories, and they line up with what I've heard from other workers all around the country, including people who have experienced really traumatic injuries. And I think what you're describing about the intensity and the ramping up of the intensity right now is a thing that we pointed out as a concern in our report, because Amazon has made a lot of claims in the past, including during the pandemic, about slowing things down or introducing new programs to try to prevent injuries. You know, Jeff Bezos put out a letter saying that he wants to be the safest place to work on the planet, you know, those kinds of things. And what we're seeing in working people's experience is the opposite of that, right? That when it comes down to it, when there's an opportunity to ramp the production back up, they're gonna do that, and it sounds like they're doing that right now. And I think what we've seen in the past is that leads to more people getting injured, and so that's really concerning.
Mhm. Courtney, we had talked earlier about the like PR stunts that Amazon has done recently, saying that they'll put meditation booths in warehouses, or they're gonna, I mean, even much more dangerously use AI to manage workers from task to tasks. What is your response to those?
Okay,
PR?
one, I feel like that's low key a scam. Like they're literally saying like, okay, well, they're gonna use AI to you know, make sure we get rotated out of certain things. You know what that is? This is a scam to get like their employees that are, you know, like the overworkers, the top performers, you know, to get into other areas to then stress them out in that area. You're literally going to be on what I like to call the full body workout circuit. You know how like when you go to the gym and like you hear leg day, you got arm day, you got, you know, whatever, back, whatever. Now you're literally going to be doing all of that. So normally, say like, instead of me working on the shift dock where I'm working out the whole body, they're going to have me, you know, or not, well, not necessarily, but yeah, or like say like pickers, they're normally just running around the warehouse all day, nonstop. You know, now they're going to be sent to SLAM, where they're also going to overwork their back now, even if it's just for a day. Doing that job is stressful. Doing any one job in there for however long, because remember, you're doing it faster than most people would do most things, you know? So, and then at certain times of the day, you know, if you're normally fast, you have to be super fast, because that time of the day, there's sometimes a lot more work coming in. So now you got to work double, triple, maybe 10 times as fast. And so now you're going to be forced to do that. You know, you're constantly lifting stuff. You're working your back. That's going to be dead. So then the next day, you know, you're doing something else, like where I work at. And it's a lot more, it's pretty much everything combined. And you're going to be literally pushed to go to other places. Say they go to inbound. Now they're going to be pushing things that are heavy. Those stores, I don't know how they do that. I couldn't do it. Pushing the water, the hundreds of gallons of milk around, the huge pallets that are literally like 7 feet tall with produce in it, pulling that around all day is literally just a scam to overwork you that much more now. Because now you're not required to constantly, you know, overwork in your normal field that you're in every day. Now you're constantly forced to overwork in everything else, you know? Mm-hmm. And then like at the drop of a hat, they can always go, oh, well, you're used to working over here. Go over here and do this all day now. And a lot of times what that means for Amazon, it usually means, you know, that's labor share. You're probably going to be stuck there. And that normally sucks, especially the better you are at it, mm-hmm. You know?
So instead of those things, what does Amazon need to change immediately?
Honestly, they look at a lot of data, a lot of numbers. Like they can literally, if I need an extra person on the dock, I can literally go into my computer. I can see exactly where they are, what area they are, what bin they're at, and I can go find them and I can go say, hey, come on, I need you, you know? And what they need to start doing is they factor everything into all of that. But humanity, the fact that you're a person, they treat robots better than they treat people, you know? They account for the fact that a robot will break down, that they may have to cycle it out for maintenance. They don't do that when it comes to us, you know? Like we can't do a high you know, a really fast-paced job, maybe 2 days out of the week, and then like on the last day or our first day back for our next work week, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, you know what, you bust your ass that last week doing this for however many days, you deserve a break. They don't factor in humanity at all. They don't factor in like, hey, this person may need to take off time because of family issues. You know, hey, you had a death in the family, you may not be in the right headspace. I've had quite a few coworkers whose family members have passed from COVID. And one of them, she actually works with me. And, you know, she hasn't been the same since. And they're always constantly complaining, I don't understand what's her problem. Well, her dad died. And she's, you know, she's not all there. And the fact that, like, you know, she has to come here every day and she has to pick up overtime because of her family situation, like, she doesn't get a chance to recover. She hasn't had a chance to, you know, get herself together mentally, emotionally, and physically. And sometimes random times out of the day, you know, she may hear something or see something or start thinking about something, and she'll burst out crying, and she'll come, you know, she did that actually to me and a supervisor 2 weeks ago, where she just came up to us crying, and she's just like, I'm so sorry, but I have to go. Like, I just gave her a hug. Go, baby girl, go handle you. And she just came back last week Friday, you know? Like, they don't factor anything into that. Their whole thing is, oh, this person's unreliable. You know what? That's it. We're replacing them. We're going to find somebody else that we can work into the ground just like that. You know, they don't factor in that there's a lot of people there that have children. And they, you know, one of my friends, she has kids, he has severe asthma. Allergy season come around, he's, you know, he ends up in and out of the hospital. And that's what happened. They literally had a whole sit down with her when she came back from taking care of him, from him literally almost dying quite a few times in the span of 2 weeks, to tell her, you're taking too much time off. I don't feel like we can trust you because you're not working overly, you're choosing your family, your child's life over, you know, pushing our numbers and everything, you know? Mm-hmm. So when it comes time now for her, say, like, now she's up for a manager slot, they're going to look at that, all because she had to make sure her child did not die, you know? So they don't factor in that point. They will do it for everything else, but they don't look at us as, you know, human beings. We are the robots, and the robots are the human beings, which is, it's crazy, but that's literally how it is.
Allegra, how about you? What are you calling for to change to lower these injury rates?
I feel like in order to lower the injury rates, they need, one, to definitely get rid of TOT, because that's causing the problem mostly. That everybody's, you know, under stress, pressure, you know, you got a certain amount of time to prep a cart and everything else, and then get your first picks in. And then you still have to be in the aisle, you know, they still expect you to social distance and everything else. And you have other people working in the aisles. And like I said earlier, they're continuously still hiring people. And so they need to change that. They need to get rid of the rate, or at least lower the rate, and give like real expectations, and take into consideration that we're human beings, and, you know, we need time to, you know, build up that amount of energy, especially after working like a whole shift, especially during our long week where we got to work 4 days. Mm-hmm. You know, we're human beings. We're gonna need, you know, some time to recover. We can't, it's impossible. Eventually you're gonna break down. And it's not, a human being breaking down is a lot different than a robot. A robot, you can fix it and repair it. A human being, you know, it's a lot harder. It's not always a guarantee they could fix themselves or you could fix them.
Hmm. Well, we're at time. I really want to thank Allegra and Courtney, Gabrielle, and David for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. Prime Day is coming up. If folks who are on the live stream or watching us want to stand up against Amazon and these practices, please follow Eyes on Amazon on Twitter, or follow Athena for All. And again, that will be at the end of June, and we'll be looking for people to take action. Again, thank you all so much for joining and sharing. Have a great day.